And welcome the sports writers from the Salem News, plus Nick Kukaroo from the Gloucester Times, Phil Stacey, Salem News sports editor, Matt Williams, Nick Giannino, and then, of course, Nick Kukaroo from the Gloucester Times, their sports editor. And I'm Bill Newell with MSONewsports.com. And, gentlemen, we kind of want to kick it off by talking about this football proposal that got discussed this past week with the MIAA and different committees and so on. And I guess I'll just outline it very quickly, and then you guys can what I'm hearing about it in my conversation with Steve Dembowski. There's a plan. One plan would be just to keep it the way it is right now, which, the playoffs start before Thanksgiving. Another plan would start the playoffs right after Thanksgiving and involve four teams per division. It'd be 8 divisions. The other one has 8 teams, and that would keep the tradition of Thanksgiving, or return the tradition of Thanksgiving as to counting to the postseason. So that's very much an oversimplification of things, but it includes basically 8 divisions. There was talk, I know, at the end of last year of shrinking that down to lesser divisions, but it seems like 8 is the way to go. Then it would also be a statewide tournament, such as the other tournaments. So you would be picking schools. There would not be a north, south, west, or central rather, and west, and so on. I mean, I think that would be the way that it would go. But anyways, I'll begin with the boss here. Phil, what do you think?
Well, it's a lot to take in. I was trying to follow along on Twitter the other day just to see what the updates were and whatnot. And I mean, anytime you're trying to make things better, I have no problem with that. And I think that's what the plan here is to try to do is make the formula for determining the best teams by division. I think they're trying to do it the best they can. There are a lot of roadblocks along the way in terms of when to start the season, when to wrap it up. There's the elephant in the room with Thanksgiving, which I think the majority of the people don't want to do away with, whether they're coaches, players, fans, administrators. Do you play playoff games, multiple playoff games after Thanksgiving, which was a big problem, or at least deemed to be a problem under the old system that was held? It's just a lot going on here. I think they're trying to do the best job that they can. And the fact that there are 4 different proposals, I think speaks to the fact that there isn't any one solution that's going to make this happen. They just need to figure out which of the 4, they and the tournament management committee need to decide what's the best of the 4 for these student athletes. Willie, you and I have talked about this a lot. What are your thoughts?
I think that there's a lot at play here. I think that it is important not to get too wrapped up in it because it's all theoretical. I think at the same time, you want to be paying attention now, because if you don't pay attention now and then something you don't like happens, it's hard to complain about it, right? So I'm trying to walk that fine line between really digging into this and getting into the weeds on it, and also knowing that this is something that the football coaches made up themselves. The tournament management didn't ask for it. The MIA is not acting on it. Like, it's kind of, all theoretical at this point. And I think that Dembo and the Coaches Association should be commended for that, for being proactive. I think they want a hand in their own destiny, and that's cool. I think at the same time, there are a lot of football playing schools where the coaches are, depending on what side you're on, the coaches are either too busy or too lazy to be involved with the Coaches Association. And, their survey that they based this number of proposals on, I believe they had 170 respondees, which is about 60% of the coaches in the state. So, I mean, there's 40% more that we haven't heard from on this. So,
and those are the people that will weigh in, like you said, after the fact and say, whoa, hey, I didn't pick this.
Well,
when they had their chance.
I think for me, longtime listeners of the podcast sort of know that where I come down on this is that maybe the best thing to do is to extend the regular season 1 week and have, 14 playoffs. I don't think you're ever going to see the entire playoffs after Thanksgiving. It's just not going to happen. The whole point of football playoffs is so that a good number of teams can make the playoffs. And if you're only putting 64 teams in the playoffs after Thanksgiving, I mean, on a percentage basis, that's very, very much lower than every other sport, and that's not what people want. That's what we found out when we started the playoffs, however many years ago it was. So I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think that
How many, not to interrupt you, but how
go ahead.
many weeks past Thanksgiving would they go if there was that many teams? It would be, what, 2 or 3 weeks of
That
playoffs?
I don't know. It
It
doesn't
would
say.
be 3 more games. It'd be
3
the
games.
Tuesday after Thanksgiving, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, well, this 10 days after that following Sunday, and then probably Saturday. And that would be if you had 8 playoff teams in each division, but you could have
Right.
4 in each division and then get rid of that extra week. So,
That's never gonna
So
happen.
basically, it's a week longer
I
than
don't
it
see
is
that.
right now.
Okay.
and again,
They already cut into the winter sports as it is. I mean, how can they go
Right.
any further into it? So many kids that play football play winter sports. So, I mean, that's tough. I like it in the sense that it gives a little more value to the Thanksgiving Day games, I guess, but it's the only way I could see it, benefiting.
I'll let Nick weigh in here in a second, but the other thing, what it also does is it gets rid of the elimination games. So you enter the tournament in football, you have a winning record. Let's say you get into the tournament, whatever the qualifying is, and it's all going to be done by max preps, from now on, apparently.
Right.
So however you get into the tournament, now you're out of the tournament if you lose that first week and you play these teams that no one in these games that no one really cares about, and it eliminates that. See, I think that's another win for this proposal. Nick?
That's a huge plus for that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I just think that there has been, with both systems, with this system and with the last system, there has been one problem that has made it flawed, and it's Thanksgiving football games. I know we're never going to get rid of them. I know it's a real long shot. I know it's not a popular opinion that I have, but I just feel like that's the root of all the problems. You take away Thanksgiving, you can play the final week of the regular season 1 week earlier in the old system and have the old playoff. You get rid of Thanksgiving now, you can have the Super Bowl a little bit earlier. You can have, the rounds a little bit spread out. You can have an extra week of regular season. I feel like it's just getting in the way of the best product, even if it is a big money-making day for some of these schools. I understand why they have it. I understand the tradition, but I just feel like that's the one thing that's getting in the way and is making both of these systems flawed. You can't have 3 games in 10 days, which Thanksgiving makes you have, and, all these consolation rounds, and, it's meaningless at the end. That's another problem that Thanksgiving's causing. I still think, St. John's Prep versus Severian is going to be a big game in October, too, no matter when they play.
It is. No, and I think, it's interesting because with the max preps, I mean, make Thanksgiving matter. So league champions aren't going to be going to the playoffs. So, I mean, not to cast aspersions on any certain programs or whatever, but, let's say Beverly beats beats Salem 49-0. That could actually take them out of the playoffs because it could lower their power ranking if Salem's undefeated. So, I mean, how backwards is that going to seem if you have Thanksgiving count for the playoffs, but a team that you destroy has a lousy strength of schedule and it actually knocks you down? That would be kind of, backwards. So,
And we still don't know what that formula is. I mean, I think that has to be whatever this max prep formula is to determine which teams are ranked higher than others needs to be known. So people have an idea that not only where they stand, but what they need to do to better themselves or how they could be hurt. It can't just be a mystery and, some Poindexter in a lab comes up with this formula and says, okay, well, you're in, you're out, and that's that. This has to be well known, I think.
And what Steve Dombowski told me this week is that they're going to use that system this year, so we'll get a better idea of how that's going to be playing off, even though things will not be restructured from the current system that we had in 2019. It'll still be the same system in 2020, barring there's football, but they'll use the max preps for the seeding purpose for the first time. So it'll be a transition in fall of 2020.
I just think that needs to be known how that formula. I'm not asking them to give away state secrets, but I think people have to understand how the formula is constructed so they have an idea of what the playoff seeding is going to look like. I mean, it was fantastic when folks like Jim Clark would put out the numbers. He would break it all down and figure out who was going to go where and what the percentages were and things like that. So at least you had a general idea of where your favorite team might be or what they might need to do in the last week of the regular season, things like that. Without that, if it's just a crapshoot, I'm not so sure I like that.
Well, and I think too, like the number of teams getting in. So if you start after Thanksgiving and it's 8x8, that's only 64 teams in the playoffs in the entire state. So, an instance like my Beverly example, like the difference between the seventh best team, the eighth best team, and the ninth best team in the whole state in their division probably isn't going to be all that much, right? Whereas with the current thing, you have 8 teams per sectional. So that's, 64 in the north, 64 in the south. In other words, there's a lot more teams getting in. So there's odds are if you win your last game, you're getting into the playoffs. We've seen the 3 and 4 teams get in, the 4 and 3 teams get in. So many teams get in. People complain too many teams get in, but that also means that you're not going to get hurt by beating a worse opponent. Whereas if there's only 64 in the whole state, you might get hurt by beating a bad opponent on that last game, whether that's a Salem team in a down year, Masco, Masco's never going to beat Everett if they're still playing them, or Everett could theoretically get hurt by beating Masco. So, just there's a lot that goes into it when the brackets are that small, and I don't want to see so few teams get into the playoffs. That's the whole point of the playoffs. And I'll throw a question out to you guys with these consolation games. Do you think that the loss of the spring season will perhaps wake some people up to appreciate the games? Like, you know what? I didn't get a single baseball game, so maybe I shouldn't take this consolation football game unseriously and blow it off, or by the time do we get there, is it out of sight, out of mind, and you still have senioritis?
I didn't have a big problem with the consolation games, but it's a very different feel. If your team did not make the playoffs, those consolation games have a much different look than if your team got eliminated from the playoffs and then had to play one. I think they've been fine to cover when it's 2 non-playoff teams, but when it's kind of like the bronze medal game, they haven't been good products.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Same.
I agree. Yeah. I'll never forget this one game. I covered a playoff game a couple of years ago. I won't say the teams, but the coach after, we were interviewing a couple other guys as well. And he said, they lost. And he said, we got a couple meaningless games left, and we got to try and rally these kids to play those games. And that just stuck with me. It's like, you're eliminated, but you still got to go play more football, but it doesn't mean anything. And then you got Thanksgiving as well. I don't know. I never was big with the current playoff system. So they can, I'm up for a change if it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why I always like the extra week, because then instead of doing 3 weeks of those lousy games, you only doing 2. And to me, in my experience, the third one has really been the one where everybody's ready for this to be over. So if you only have 2, maybe it's better.
Nino, I know, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying at all, but I've also heard on the flip side from coaches and Kooks and Willie, you guys, I know both played on good teams in high school, but what's the difference between that and a team that was 1-6 or 2-6 in November under the old system, and you still had a game or 2 to play before Thanksgiving? I think they still approach it the same way. It wasn't as though like, okay, let's just get through these last couple of games and then we have Thanksgiving. We'll try to pull off the old upset then. Yeah. I think teams still tried to play. It's just a different mindset now because you have the word playoff attached to it. And once you lose in the playoffs,
that's what it is. It's just that playoff.
I'm not good enough. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think going back to your point, Phil, is that if let's say you are 1-5, you're rolling down the season, you go 1-6. Your next game, though, you're playing a league opponent. In other words, it may not, and it may be a mismatch. It may be a match, so to speak, as far as the quality goes. But you're playing a league opponent, and that same league opponent, like Willie's mentioned in other sports, you're a multi-sport star. You may play him again in basketball. You may play him again in hockey. You may play him again in baseball. So it means a little more, and it's been on your schedule. You've known since summer who you're playing, and that you're playing. Let's say Salem is playing at Saugus the second week of November. You know that.
As opposed to you find out on a Monday, oh, we're playing Boston Latin Friday at 6 p.m. in Dorchester, kind of thing.
So in other words, I like this new plan because it restores a regular season. It restores Thanksgiving. And now the playoffs, there are a few question marks. I get it. I'm comfortable with 8 teams and not 16 in each division making the playoffs. That's probably better than 4. I would even take 4, to be honest with you, but I'll go with the 8. Which I think is the prominent view right now. Is that's the most popular view from what I'm hearing. What I don't really like is those Tuesday games. So you play Thanksgiving, and then the following Tuesday, that's when the playoffs begin. They did that a few years ago. I kind of thought those were a disaster. Having said that, though, because you're playing at a home site, so to speak. And it just seemed like the MIA was totally unprepared for these Tuesday games. The schools were unprepared. I mean, I went to games that were on the road, and it was no rosters at the game, stuff like that. That if you're a sports writer showing up and stuff, we often get our rosters ahead of time because of that now. You know what I mean? Because that experience of a number of years ago, we never show up without a roster, but hopefully, anyways. But you know what I mean? It's just one of those things that Tuesday game comes up fast. But I could live with that to maintain the regular season, the Thanksgiving, and some regular playoffs. And again, once you whittle this down, you go to the Tuesday, then you play that following Sunday after Thanksgiving, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, followed by the Sunday. Then there are only a handful of teams left for the Super Bowl. And I'm sorry, but I think I'm sorry. I think winter sports can suck it up a little bit, and figure this thing out, because there's no end date on winter sports. There's no holiday. There's no Thanksgiving. There's no President's Day that things have to be over by. You could figure this out.
But let me be devil's advocate here. Say your point guard of the basketball team is also the quarterback, and he's gone through an entire season and then he'll play on Thanksgiving. Then he's going to turn around and play on Tuesday. And if they're fortunate enough to win, he's going to turn around and play again on Saturday. And then another week after that. That is a beat-up body right there. Now you're asking him to jump right into basketball season. That's going to hurt him and consequently the team on the front end of that schedule. So maybe instead of going, let's say 12-8, the basketball team now goes 10-10, or maybe even misses the tournament at 9-11 because he was not ready to go when the season started. I'm just playing devil's advocate. There's always
here's my counter to that. And I'm not saying that it's not. And if I'm a basketball coach or a hockey coach, I get it. I understand the point of view. I'm with you. But on the other hand, to qualify for the basketball state tournament, it's 50%. What Willie was talking about earlier, the football thing, it's down closer to 20% of the teams qualify. It's a much shorter season. It's a 10-game schedule. It's not a 20-game schedule. So less teams qualify for the postseason. So yeah, football's a unique sport. It's the most unique sport. All the other fall sports are over in early November, except
at
for
least
football.
A month.
Right. You know what I mean?
And let's circle back to a point that Kooks made too about Thanksgiving. Is it this white whale that we can never get rid of? I mean, I like Thanksgiving personally. It's tradition. It's a lot of great things. But let's not kid ourselves that it's the same from even 10 years ago. It is
because Phil, of what we've done because of what we did to the Thanksgiving game. That's why.
But is it ever going to go back to the way it was though? Because I don't see that happening. I don't see the crowds coming like they used to. I don't see the pomp and circumstance and the build up and anticipation. Yeah, there'll always be people that attend the games and alumni that come back. But I just don't think it's the same. And I'm kind of thinking that we're maybe beyond getting back to that point. That's just my thought on it.
It's because let me just add one thing. Phil, it's because of the Salem News and the Gloucester Times, because 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, all you guys are covering are the playoff games. You're covering Marblehead and Danvers and all the other playoff games. You're giving short shift to the other teams that that are waiting for their big Thanksgiving Day game but may not be in the playoffs. You know what I mean? I think I don't know. Is anything the same as it was? But I think what this does is I think it would help that rather than it is the white elephant, I guess.
The other thing too, to go back to your point about you're playing on Thanksgiving and then right back at it that Tuesday for those playoff teams or some of those playoff teams. Would rest be a factor there too? I mean, that's going to take away some of the value from Thanksgiving too, like 4 days off. Some of these coaches might sit their stars on Thanksgiving, because the bigger game is going to be on Tuesday for the playoffs.
Which is happening now as it is
already, yeah, exactly.
When the playoff game isn't for another 9 days, they're doing that because they don't want to see kids get banged up. I mean, look at 2 years ago, Bishop Fenwick beat St. Mary's 60-0, and St. Mary's didn't start any of their regulars that day. So Fenwick was like, hey, the hell with it. We're just going to play our game then,
Well,
so,
Steve Dombrowski tells a story that this year there's a team out of the Central Mass. They canceled the game because both teams were in the postseason.
Right.
They canceled their Thanksgiving game.
So how much do they care about Thanksgiving? You know? They're not too worried about the alumni then.
But I mean, I do feel as though, anecdotally, there are less teams resting their starters on Thanksgiving now than there were with the game on Tuesday, I think. I mean, that seems to, there are outliers. You hear about your Duxbury's and your St. Mary's, on occasion. But I feel like that happened more when the games were on Tuesday. I don't have any studies or whatever to back that up, but just kind of following it, it feels like that's less of a thing than it was 5 years ago.
But when was the last time the Thanksgiving game meant anything as far as postseason? I don't know when it was.
Years ago? What do you mean?
But it would. Under this system, it would. So, in other words, you can rest your players, but it may impact your postseason seedings. Go ahead and do it.
If you're number one and you throw the game and lose, what are you going to fall to number 3? So, you're still hosting, 3-6 might be a better matchup. It might end up being Belichick throwing the ball away to get the Jaguars. I mean, who's to say?
And, Thanksgiving now, too, also can have a negative effect on good teams that go deep in the tournament. I've seen it in the Gloucester Danvers rivalry twice in the last 5 years. I want to say it was 2015 down here at Newell Stadium. Gloucester beat Danvers 14-7 because they had a bye, and Danvers had to play Tewksbury the week before. And then we saw it, in 2018 as well. Gloucester played Neshoba. Danvers had a bye, and it wasn't a close game when it would have been an incredibly close game if not for it. So it's like, you kind of, if you win your section and don't go to the Super Bowl, you basically are handicapped on Thanksgiving now.
And both of those teams lost in the weeks that they played leading up to Thanksgiving. So there's a natural letdown, like, oh, got to strap them on again, it was basically four days from now.
That game was decided 3 weeks before Thanksgiving because one team got a week off and the other one didn't.
Right.
Look at Marblehead and Swampscott. I mean, how incredible has that series been? And everything that happened in that series last year went against conventional wisdom. Swampscott played all their starters on Thanksgiving. They lost in the last minute anyway. And that didn't even deflate them. They still rallied to win the Super Bowl. And now
Shut up
gets
in the Super Bowl
about how they beat Swampscott's state championship team. So, I mean, that's one rivalry that has certainly endured this new system and stayed pretty hot.
In that Swampscott division, what were they, 5, right? Division 5? Now, I think they were a 4 seed in 5, right? Number 4 seed. That's what I was going through. I could be wrong on that. But clearly, they were the favorite in that seat. So the past score, rating system. I mean, I'm sorry, it wasn't God's gift to rating system. So I say throw it out. I say try something else is what I'm saying. Go ahead, try something else.
I believe the words we used were, if they lose a game in this section, it will be an upset of epic proportion.
Right. And it was only because of another upset they got an actual another home game where they got a higher seed, right? Later on, something else happened. There was an
somebody
upset.
Gave them a real good game. Was it Pentucket? A much closer game than you thought?
Yeah, it was Pentucket. They beat them on the last play. Didn't they get like a 2-point conversion? I only know this because, I went to Pentucket and I remember picking them in the paper and no one else. You guys were like, oh, come on. They're going to, win by 30 points. And it ended up being like a 2-point game.
I'm going to give you guys the 3 or 4 minute warning here on our podcast here today, the video podcast. So I want to leave it open to other things here if you guys want to chime in on whatever.
I'm actually going to cut out because I have a 2:30 Zoom meeting, my 6th of the day, with one of our student athlete nominees. So I'm going to bid you fellas adieu, but I always enjoy talking pigskin with you guys. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And look forward to talking next week. Have a good weekend. Stay safe.
All right.
And keep on trucking.
All right, Phil.
All right, we'll talk then.
Good.
Nick C, do you want to say anything?
I just think no matter what we do for, a rating system, I think it's going to be the same problem is how do you measure strength of schedule? I feel like that's always going to be the flaw because I don't know how you measure it.
Right. You don't know until you know. All the time, everybody thought SEC until Clemson, wrecked them. So you just don't know until somebody actually wins the game. And that's why, to me, the more teams that get in, the better. Like if you're in the tournament, whether you're a 3 seed, a 5 seed, a 6 seed, whatever, if you're pretty good, you're going to find a way to win. But if you're left out of the tournament because of strength of schedule, which I think we would see if there were only 8 teams across the whole state, I think we would see teams that could win the thing left out. And that's sort of my whole crusade about wanting football playoffs in the first place is just teams that are capable of winning the state title shouldn't be out.
Especially
go ahead. I'm sorry, Nick.
I was just saying, especially in the lower divisions, I feel like that would be the toughest one. I feel like a lot of those lower seeds in the lower divisions can be really good teams that play in tough conferences.
Absolutely. It feels good to just be talking about sports and not,
I
wonder if they're going to play or whatever,
Yeah, that's that. I mean, I think you guys make a good point. I mean, I think that 4 is a low number in each division, but I do think that 8 covers what you're talking about, Willie, in my opinion anyways. But on that note, we'll wrap it up here, guys. Those are the sports writers from the Salem News, plus Nick Kukaroo from the Gloucester Times. I'm Bill Newell with MSO News Sports. Thanks for joining us this week.